We preview tonight's big Kings-Oilers game with the help of Reid Wilkins from Oilers Radio on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we're also on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20-plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are very happy to welcome in from CHED Radio in Edmonton, Reid Wilkins, who's going to join us to talk a little bit about tonight's big game. At least it's a big game for the Kings. Reid, is it a big game for the Oilers? Is there any kind of buzz for this game tonight?
Well, first of all, Eddie, it's great to see you because when I've been on with you before, I think it's just been over the phone. So nice to virtually meet you face to face. It's too bad it's not convenient for me to do this outside or to turn my camera around because it is snowing today in Edmonton, oddly enough. I was joking with Nick Nixon from the Kings broadcast. They got in last night, and I said, so you guys had spring in Edmonton last night, and now it's winter today. The seasons are going in the wrong order. So it is a nice snowfall here for LA landing today. There is buzz about this game. I was just checking here. It's the 25th time these teams have played since the start of the 21-22 season, so since the fall of 21. So they know each other very well. I think there is buzz about the game because it is a legitimate rivalry with two consecutive playoff meetings. So there definitely is that. I think that there is a rivalry because the Kings force the Oilers often to get outside of their comfort zone because of how committed Los Angeles plays in the neutral zone, that Edmonton can't always push the pace as much as they might like. Someone jokingly asked Leon Draisaitl today if he dies a little bit inside every time he has to dump the puck in. And he jokingly said that, yes, he does. He'd sooner carry it in. And then I think that there's more buzz because this is still the most likely first-round playoff matchup, right? Again, I know Vegas is right there, so we'll see. And certainly if LA wins tonight, then that gives them still a really good chance to maybe get home ice in the first round if these two teams play each other. So, yes, there is a buzz about it. I do think that if you asked Oilers fans, who do you hate the most, they would probably say Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's always more of a rivalry for the fans of the team who lost, right? So I would imagine Kings fans probably hate the Oilers more than Oilers fans hate the Kings. And don't get me wrong, they don't love the Kings, but I think probably the number one rival for Oilers fans would be Vegas just because they knocked them out of the playoffs last year. But yes, this is still a legitimate rivalry with, the potential for some we know about the Draisaitl ankle injury, and who was it the McDavid injured last year? Was it Anderson that he hit from behind? That was still in the regular season. So stuff's happened between these two teams, right? So that kind of adds to the fun.
Well, you're right. It certainly feels like it's going to be round 3 between the Kings and Oilers. And I've had mixed feelings about this because on the one hand, to slay that dragon that's, taking you out of the playoffs 2 years in a row would feel probably even better than just the first round playoff win, which the Kings stated as their big goal at the beginning of the year, right? It's not just about good enough to get into the playoffs. It's about advancing into the playoffs. But on the other hand, the results have been what the results have been. Now the Kings have made some changes, but I was wondering, do you think Oilers fans are like, all right, the Kings again, we own these guys? Or is it like, the Kings again?
That's a good question because somebody, I kind of impromptu because I didn't plan it, but it was sort of one of those where the listeners take the direction of your show. I had a couple of people text and call into my talk show complaining about the playoff format because it's the same matchups year after year, right? Now, it's not as bad as, and you gave your credentials off the top, so you remember the Smythe division. And, it seemed like in the Adams division, it was, Montreal, Hartford, and then Montreal, Boston in the second round. And there was Edmonton, LA, or Edmonton, Winnipeg, and then Edmonton, Calgary in the Smythe final. I think there would be a little bit of, oh, geez, the Kings again, just because you might want to see somebody else and get some variety.
Yeah.
I think from a competitive standpoint, I mean, I do think, and I'm not saying this to be a homer or cocky, because it's very close to the playoffs. I do think if they played each other, the Oilers would and should be favored slightly, just because of the season they've had since the 13th game. It's so they've had a pretty good year. But yeah, I don't know if you ask the fan base, they're probably a little bit more like, seriously, LA again, just because sometimes you want a little bit of variety and you want to see somebody else.
And that's interesting, because the NHL, part of the reason why they have this playoff format is because they want to foster those rivalries. So it's a little ironic that I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. I think I could totally understand that.
Well,
so,
and it's
go ahead.
Yeah, I won't go off on too far of a tangent, but yet it's not fully committed to playoff rivalries, because Vancouver-Nashville could be a first-round series. Right. I know they played, 15 years ago or something like that. But
they're trying to have it both ways, right?
They're trying to have it both ways, and then the top seed sometimes has to travel more than if they stayed in their division, so nothing's perfect, right?
Well, the Kings and the Oilers have something more in common than just seemingly meeting every year in the playoffs. Both teams made coaching changes this year. The Oilers very early, the Kings a bit late. But 13 games in, as you mentioned, 3-9-1 was the record, and GM Ken Holland decided that's enough Jay Woodcroft, even though he had guided them to the playoffs in each of his 2 years. And he brings in a guy who has had no NHL experience in Chris Knobloch, and all the Oilers did was win, I think it was 8 straight, and then lost a couple, and then went on a 16-game winning streak. So I guess he had the desired effect. Does that speak, though, to the pressure that the Oilers are under to get it done this year, that they weren't willing to see how this would play out, and they felt they had to do something relatively drastic early on?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, they were awful early in the season. Like, I do our post-game show with Rob Brown, who played for best known for playing for the Penguins. And I mean, I was talking when they were going 2-9-1, and then, well, they won their last game with Woodcroft. I was saying, like, right now in October and then into November, I said the goal is not the playoffs. The goal is not the Stanley Cup. The goal is to win one game, win a game, and then try to win another one. That's how bad they were. Like, they looked like they couldn't win a single game. Was that all on Woodcroft? No. I think this team came in with expectations that were so high. They were focused on the playoffs before they were thinking about the games in October. I mean, we have it in our intro to our show. McDavid said it last year after the season. It's cup or bust. Like, that's the goal. And I think they kind of came into training camp in the regular season already thinking about game 83. And then we're getting, blown out by Vancouver and losing 2 games to Vancouver and, losing to Philadelphia and Minnesota and giving up 7 goals. So, and then I think Woodcroft, I think that in hindsight and what, the criticism that Woodcroft and Dave Manson will get is, did they overreact to the loss to Vegas? Did they try to change too much? And I also think, I think they're a little calmer team. And I kind of hate to say that, because it's not like Woodcroft was a madman or anything like that, but I think he was feeling the pressure too. He got thrown out of a game in Vancouver when they lost to them the 3rd time. They played Vancouver 3 times in those first 12 games and lost all 3. So I think Knobloch calmed things down a little bit, and they started to take care of the neutral zone and eliminate chances off the rush a little bit better. And then they just played better. They got better goaltending. McDavid had a bit of an early season injury. He obviously came to life. Matthias Ekholm was banged up in the preseason and training camp, and then missed the first game of the year. He got back into form. So it wasn't all Woodcroft, but you're right. Sometimes the coach pays the price. Interesting side note as well. I don't know if you've met or talked to this gentleman, but a couple months ago, a good friend of mine left the Oilers organization. His name's Sean May. He does media relations, and he is now in charge of that department for the Los Angeles Kings. He left the Oilers for the Kings. So he has twice been doing media relations when Todd McClellan has been fired. And he was with the Oilers when Woodcroft was fired, and then he was with the Kings when McClellan was fired. So I don't know how many guys have had to deal with 2 coaching firings with different
Very
organizations in the same
interesting.
year. There's your random fun fact for the day. Sean would
Very
probably
interesting.
hate me for saying that because it's obviously not his fault, but weird timing.
We're going to have more with Reid Wilkins here, get his take on some of the particulars with the Oilers so far this season. We'll do that here next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game from the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet wins of $5. That's $200 back if you hit on your point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. We've got a little bit more with Reid Wilkins. Is March Madness a thing in Canada at all, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is. Everybody fills out a bracket and nobody has any clue who they're picking.
Well,
I shouldn't say nobody because there are fans, but no. March Madness is a thing. Yeah,
everyone
absolutely.
loves brackets, right? They love filling out those brackets.
I got a buddy. So we went to broadcasting school together here in Edmonton. We met in 1998. He has done a bracket every year since I've known him. He now works at a radio station in Calgary. And he always, and I've won it twice, like just randomly in 26 years or whatever that would be. But he usually gets 15 to 25 people, and it's everybody from like sports fans who probably know a little bit to colleagues who are like, okay, it's only $10, I'll go in. So it is a thing. I still think it's a great spectacle, Eddie. Like I would say in the late 80s and through the 90s, for a Canadian, probably knew a fair bit about college basketball. Like I would know the star players. I would even watch the odd, regular season game. But now I feel like with the one and dones to the NBA and being so immersed in Oilers coverage, I don't really know as much. So I'm pretty much filling out the bracket blind or doing like literally 10 minutes of research.
Yeah. You're not the only one.
There's a dark horse team. So
yeah,
but no, it's a thing. Yeah, people fill out those brackets in Canada. Absolutely, everybody knows what it is.
Interesting. Well, I don't know if the Oilers would be a one seed in the tournament, but Conor McDavid certainly is always high on the list of obviously great players, former Hart Trophy winner, and all that. Kings fans are well aware of him, but he's having an interesting season. Only 26 goals after he had 64 the previous year. But he already has a career-high 93 assists. I know there was some joking, I guess, from him during the season. He wasn't going to look to score goals anymore. That's obviously not true. But what do you make of this season for Conor McDavid?
Well, I mean, again, except for about the first 15 games when I think he was something like 130th in scoring. Might have even been lower than that. I mean, it's been spectacular. I mean, he's the driving force of one of the best power plays in the history of the NHL. I mean, it's up there with the Canadians and Islanders of the late 70s and early 80s for being over 25% year after year. He continues to tilt the ice. He continues to be the fastest skater who can be skilled at the same time. Yeah, it is interesting how his goals are probably going to wind up in half or less than half from last year, but he's still producing just as much offense. I think last year he went in with the mindset of trying to score a little bit more. I mean, there was the joke that Draisaitl challenged him to score 60 and, beat Matthews and all that kind of stuff. And then I also think you factor in that Zach Hyman has been finishing at a higher rate than he ever has in his career. So there's, the goals aren't there for McDavid, but the total goals that he's producing with one of his line mates and power play mates is just the same. So, yeah, I mean, what can you say? Like, he's going to get 100 assists. I don't know what it is today, Eddie, but one of my stats I did for a pregame show last week was that if you just took his assists, he'd be 10th in scoring. So it's not quite on par with the years Gretzky would have won the scoring title if he had scored. But with his assists, he's a top 10 player. So it's kind of funny how it's worked out, but the points and the production are still there.
Leon Draisaitl has been great as usual. You mentioned Zach Hyman, who's had an amazing year with 51 goals. I got to ask you about the goaltending. Former Oiler Cam Talbot apparently going to start tonight for the Kings. I assume it's Stuart Skinner in net for Edmonton, his third season. From afar, it seems like he's been okay, pretty good. But I guess the question is, and I'm sure Oiler fans have it as well, is okay and pretty good enough to get the Oilers where they want to be?
Well, I'd say he's been better than okay. I would say certainly good. Like if you went on that a scale of poor, fair, average, very good, or excellent, I would put him very good. Like I'd give him a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I really would. I know his save percentage is a little lower than last year. I think his goals against average is a bit better. His win total is very good. And again, other than that early season disaster when nobody looked good and it got Jack Campbell sent to the minors, I think he's had a pretty good season. I will say that you're on the right track, that Oilers fans are nervous, but they always find something to get nervous about. I mean, we get a lot of calls of, well, he's going to be tired in the playoffs because he was tired last year. And I always say, okay, true, but you're writing a guy off after one playoff appearance. If everybody has to win something for the first time. So I guess that with Skinner and some of the other players on this group, they're going to get slapped with that until they actually do it. But he's played quite well. Calvin Pickard, the other goaltender, has been one of the best stories this year. The third string goal, he's gone 10-5 with about a 920. I think he dipped a little bit below 920 because he had a bit of a rough game in Ottawa. But I still think the Oilers have pretty good goaltending. And if you look around the NHL, like there aren't as many elite goaltenders as there used to be. Like this isn't the Hasek Brodeur era where it seemed like more likely your goalie was one of the stars than less likely. So I think in a series, they got as good a chance as anybody in the other net. I think you look around, Eddie, like who's a lock in net, right? It's such a strange position. And if you want to talk about, okay, well, you have to have won before to win. I don't know. Who are the last 5 cup-winning goaltenders? Vasilevsky, a legitimate star.
Right.
Adin Hill, and Rob Brown says this, my colleague, all the time. He says last February, he wouldn't have known what team Adin Hill played for. And then Darcy Kemper, who's been a solid but unspectacular NHL goaltender. And then I think you go back to Binnington as the other guy, who was like literally a no-name. So I kind of reject the notion that, well, Skinner's never won, so he's never going to win, and he's not Sorokin or Shesterkin or whoever. Is he Hellebuck? No. Well, the Oilers beat Hellebuck the other night. So, I don't know. I'm not as freaked out about the Oilers goaltending, I think, as a lot of people. I will say this. I do like Cam Talbot a lot, like one of the best human beings I ever covered when he was in Edmonton. And I know I guess he had that one rough patch when McClellan lost his job, but he's having a pretty good year as well. But yeah, I think if Skinner kind of is solid, then yeah, he gives the Oilers a chance every night for sure.
Reid, I'll get you out of here on this one, and I know that you're obviously focused on the Oilers, but is there anything from afar about the LA Kings that intrigues you or that you're interested in?
Yes. I just think that, well, I'll say goaltending for them, because what are they spending on their 2 goalies? Like, isn't it
less than $2 million?
Like, that's incredible. And again, I like Talbot, but like if you asked me which team has more questions about playoff goaltending of these 2 teams, I would actually say LA. Right. And then, once they get into the playoffs, I feel like everybody knows what LA is going to do, right? They're going to try to clamp down the neutral zone, right? And play that way. And I know they still have a lot of talent and they can still score, but when it comes to crunch time in the postseason, can they be the team that gets that key goal? And I know against Edmonton last year, they did win 2 games in overtime, both on power plays, but as that series wore on, I felt like Edmonton's offense sort of tilted it. Korpisalo couldn't make the big saves, and that's how Edmonton won the series. I know it's different goaltenders now, but that would still be my question for the Kings. Like they're a really good team, but in a really, really tough division. And do they have quite enough if they overcame Edmonton then to overcome Vegas or Vancouver, right? Like are they built for multiple series wins? That would sort of be what I'm looking at.
That is Reid Wilkins, the host of Inside Sports and part of the Oilers broadcast network on CHED Radio up there in Edmonton. Reid, thank you for doing this. And if we do, in fact, have Kings Oilers Part 3, maybe we can have you back on to talk a little playoff hockey as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, Eddie. I really appreciate that you asked me to come on.
And we really appreciate you joining us. All right, looking forward to the game tonight, Reid. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you next time. All right. That was, again, Reid Wilkins from CHED Radio up in Edmonton, and we were very happy to have him on. Appreciate getting his insight a little bit on the Edmonton Oilers. We still got some more show to talk about. We'll talk a little bit more about the Oilers themselves, talk about where things are in the Western Conference playoff race and the Pacific Division. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always can find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. The LA Kings, as you might have heard, face the Edmonton Oilers tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Well, we're happy to get Reid Wilkins on to talk a little bit about the Oilers. We're going to talk a little bit more about them, and unfortunately, I didn't have time to ask Reid about this, but there's an interesting controversy perhaps going on with the Oilers. It has nothing to do with them, though. It has something to do with a hockey media personality. I assume he's in Canada. I've never heard of this person. And you may not have known about this unless you're on social media, but Oilers forward Zach Hyman is having a career year. He scored 51 goals. And of course, a lot of that is because he's playing with Conor McDavid. But still, 51 goals is 51 goals. And you got to give credit where credit is due. And he's never had a season like this before. But there was a person who posted a video about the narrative around Zach Hyman and the fact that he grew up apparently privileged and had a lot of advantages that a lot of other players didn't have. And this person decided it was very important to point this out, and that people in the hockey media were ignoring this. Now, he's kind of, if you saw the original video, he kind of was going after the media because he felt, for whatever reason, that this was an important part of his story and no one was talking about it. And a lot of people of note in hockey media, and even some former NHL players, have pushed back on this person. And he's now kind of saying, well, I just wanted to have a conversation about how hockey is a rich sport and it's not available to people who can't afford it. And that is a fair point, but it was an interesting timed controversy, and I'm sure that's been talked about a bit in Edmonton. But we talk about Connor McDavid, we talk about Leon Draisaitl. Certainly, if you're going to watch the game tonight, an interesting person to focus on is Zach Hyman. And part of the reason why Connor McDavid doesn't have as many goals as he does and has the absurd number of assists that he does is because he's been feeding Zach Hyman for most of the season. So there's that. As far as going into tonight's game, this is not going to be a battle for the number 2 spot in the Pacific Division. The Oilers have 90 points. The Kings have 87 points. So if the Kings win in regulation, they can't catch the Oilers. They can only move 2 points back. But obviously, it's still a very, very important game between the two teams. This is the 4th and final meeting between the Kings and the Oilers. Edmonton has won 2 of the 3 matchups so far. Of course, we know how the Kings have been playing of late. Big wins over Tampa Bay, big win over Vancouver to wrap up a 3-game stand against 2 or 3 very good and talented playoff teams, and to send a message possibly to the Oilers, if there is in fact a round 3 between the Kings and Oilers, I think makes this game a bit more important than otherwise it would. And it's still important either way. This is a big game. This is the best chance the Kings have to gain ground on the Oilers head-to-head. Vegas is right behind the Kings with 86 points. So the Golden Knights, even though they've got some injury issues in net, win, don't they? They're right there for the Kings as well. So the possibility of the Kings getting second is there, but I don't think it's great. I think the 3rd spot is probably where LA is going to end up. They could fall behind Vegas. If they do, they'd be the number 2 wildcard team because Nashville's playing so well. They've pretty much locked down that number 1 wildcard spot. So it's still to be determined. It is still to be determined. But tonight feels like a big game because of the history between the two teams, because of the, I think, better than likely possibility that they're going to meet up in the playoffs again. So to send that message to the Oilers, for the Kings to send the message to themselves, and everything in between, I think is going to make this game tonight feel like kind of a quasi playoff game. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to hopefully talking about a big Kings win coming up on Friday's show. But yeah, big game for a number of reasons tonight for the LA Kings and for the Edmonton Oilers as well. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Friday, we're going to, of course, recap the Kings-Oilers game, break it all down, and give you all the opinions on what happened. And then, of course, it is a Friday, so that means we'll have another Kings fan feedback show as well. You want to get in on that? We would love to have your comments. It is Locked On Eddie. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com. And the show tomorrow will not be super early. It will be a little bit later in the day, probably in the afternoon. So if you don't have to get that email in after the game tonight, but if you want to get your thoughts on the game, certainly get it in as soon as you can. Also, love for you to leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section. Appreciate that. It helps the algorithm. Also, would love you to stay interactive with the show by following us on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. Thanks to Reid Wilkins from CHED Radio for joining us. Really appreciate that interview. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you on Friday. And as always, and especially tonight, go Kings, go.